Hello, everybody, and welcome to Google Partners Academy on Air. This week, we're going to be talking about attribution. Yay! Understanding all levels of the funnel. Before we get to this really exciting topic, let's introduce ourselves. So, my name is Jessie Hochhalter, and I am on the sales strategy and enablement team here at Google. And I do trainings, I do speaking events, I do anything to enable our partners to sell more and to be better partners to the end advertisers. I'm really, really passionate about this, and I love what I do. If you guys have seen any of these live streams, they're one of my favorite things to do. And fun fact, next weekend, my little brother, my baby brother, is getting married. And last night, he asked me to speak at the wedding. So if you guys have any suggestions, any canned, emotional stories, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'd really appreciate that. Logan?
What's up, everyone? My name is Logan Wellbaum. I'm the technical program manager here at Google. And my main role is to really understand all of our products, break them down, understand their complexities, and make them easier for all of you to understand. I'm happy to be here with you all today to talk about attribution. A fun fact about myself is that I learned, this isn't fun, but I learned AdWords
Great setup.
Yeah. I learned AdWords through starting my own business. So I said this last week as well, but if I understand your highs and I understand your lows. So I love talking about attribution. I think it's going to be a really impactful session today.
Great. Love me some attribution as well. So before we get into the attribution piece, I just want to, because this is a series, I want to make sure that we cover just a recap of what we talked about last week in the measurement section. So what we did in terms of measurement is actually we want to just make sure that we're actually gathering all of the data that we need. So some of the best practices we talked about were including cross-device conversions in your conversion column. So making sure you're doing that. One of my favorites and an essential thing to do is linking Google Analytics to AdWords so that you can make sure that you're importing website-related metrics to AdWords and then getting that ad data back to Analytics so you can make really smart decisions. Make sure you're including every conversion action that's important to your business in your conversion column. So not just those hard conversions, but really looking at what is affecting our business and what's getting us to that end goal and including those. And then we'll talk about this again a little bit later today because it's also applicable here, but make sure to review and increase your look back window so that you can capture conversions from users with longer purchase paths. So sometimes things can take, several days, even a week or more to actually, start from the journey to actually end in a conversion. And then track the value of the conversions through dynamic values. So make sure that you're tracking how much those conversions are worth. And then choose the correct conversion count. So this is count 1 for leads and count every for purchases. All right?
Yeah, and we talked about the why and the how to do that week. So that will set you up for this week and how to optimize and to start attribution. And also, we talked about how complex the path to purchase really is. There's multiple touch points across the path to purchase. And think about if you're booking a vacation. You rarely do that in one sitting. And if we go to this example right here and we look at the Nexus 9 and we see that, all right, this is a $200 million market and these are arbitrary numbers, but think about Nexus 9 as that sort of brand term for you, or think about it as that keyword that you always try to optimize for. It's the name of your product, it's the name of your service. And if we go further down and we take highly rated tablets, this could be a great generic search term for your brand. It's a larger market, and think about this again, a $2 billion market. More people can search for this. It's a generic search term, but you're rarely, maybe, you're not going to get that many conversions with the search term. And if we go even farther, great tech gifts, $20 billion market. And again, these are arbitrary numbers, but think about it this way. This could be the purchase path for a dad trying to buy something for his daughter.
That's very sweet.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome, especially for Christmas. And, he doesn't really know that he wants a Nexus 9 yet, so he's going to search for great tech gifts. He did the research process. Maybe he's on his mobile phone. He heads over to desktop to check out highly rated tablets. He knows that, all right, tablets is the way to go. And then he goes to Nexus 9. So without understanding these different touch points, you could be missing out and optimizing by potentially even excluding these from your campaigns. So what we're going to talk about today is how you understand and learn from these touch points so you can even get more market reach and get into those larger markets.
Yeah, and I love this slide because, as you said, a lot of people, they won't see conversions happening on those more generic keywords. But if you exclude those, then you're missing out on this huge, $20 billion market or $2 billion market or whatever it might be, because you're only focusing on those branded terms. I love this.
Right. And we're here to talk today about how you can really understand these different touch points. And a lot of marketers by default are using just that last click. And if we can really understand these different touch points like a sports team does, I mean, if we think about, Cristiano Ronaldo or Steph Curry or LeBron James is that far right conversion, they're usually the ones getting the buckets. They're ones that are getting the points. But if we think about how these different players assist and can actually get to that conversion, it's going to be huge for your business.
Absolutely. So as we mentioned last week, we talked about measurement, and because we want to make sure the whole theme of this month is accurately measuring, attributing, and acting on the entire user journey so that you can unlock new growth opportunities. Because if you're just looking at the things that are converting into that actual, sale or lead, and you're ignoring the things that are happening beforehand, you could be leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. So we talked about measurement. We talked about correctly tracking all conversions that matter, not just those end conversions. Now we're going to talk about attribution. Next week, we hope you join us for ACT, because, we want to make sure that we're actually acting on this great data that we have. But today we're going to try to convince you to shift to a multi-touch attribution model. So we're going to talk about what this means, but let's kind of just set this up in terms of what the attribution models actually are, what they look like, and how we can do this. So now this is I think really crucial here is we know whether the goal is actually completed. That's expected. We know if someone purchased, we know if someone called, we know if that end conversion happened. We just know this. So let's go back to your sports example. Let's talk about basketball. Basketball is my favorite. I'm a big Laker fan, which is a little sad for me right now. I know you guys can feel really bad. But what we see is that, assists don't win the game, right? Things like this, they're not keeping score, the Lakers had, 25 assists, whereas no, that's not how it works. It's all based on buckets. It's based on points. So the points obviously are the most important thing. In businesses, phone calls, those actual sales, those are the most important things. We understand this. But if we gain insights into actions that happen before the bucket or before the sale and figure out how that basket was actually made, how that phone call was actually, came to fruition, this is where we're going to be able to get more phone calls or get more buckets. That's why in basketball, we measure things like assists, like rebounds, because we want to understand how did we maneuver the players to get, Steph Curry in the position to score.
So you can repeat that process.
Exactly. So you can repeat it over and over again, or as the slide says, a bridge. Perfect. So to kind of, really make this more personal, ask yourself this question. Have you ever booked a vacation in one sitting on one device? So you sat down, whether it's on your desktop computer or, you sat there with a mobile device, and from end to finish, you had the idea, I want to go on vacation, and then you just booked it.
Never,
right? The answer is probably no, because it takes a lot of planning to go into this. It probably looks more like this. So Sunday, you're just doing some searches. You might be a little wine drunk from brunch, and you say best tropical vacations, and you find out that Puerto Rico looks pretty awesome. It's the best destination. And then, you fall asleep, wake up on Monday, you get really, really, busy with work, and you forget about your vacation. But then someone on Tuesday does something, it really irritates you, and you're, you know what, Puerto Rico, let me think about that again. And you search for best bed and breakfast, and you find a really cool spot, but then you get interrupted because you're not supposed to be doing that at work. Let's be real. And then the next day, you do another search, or you're looking around on the internet, maybe you're reading some news, and you get remarketed to by that bed and breakfast. And you say, oh yeah, you know what? I was looking at that. I want to kind of go a little bit further. Thursday comes around, you have a happy hour, so you're nice, and you do something on Thursday, go out, so you're fine. But then Friday, you're like, you know what? It's Friday, I'm feeling good, I'm booking this vacation.
Yeah.
Pretty complex process.
This is happening all the time. People are going from search to YouTube to display.
Yep.
It's happening all the time.
And they're probably also doing it across multiple devices. So when I mentioned on Sunday, maybe they're at brunch right then and they're searching on their phones. Then on Tuesday when they're at work, they could be on their work computer. Wednesday, maybe they're in traffic and they're searching. Don't do that. It's not a good idea. Then Friday, this is where maybe they're home and they're like, you know what, I'm going to book. So this is happening not only across different, YouTube, different channels, different, search display, but also across devices.
Right. And we're going to get into these reports a little bit later today. But in Google Analytics, we have great reports that allow you to see these complex paths. And you can see how people are going from direct to referral, which could be YouTube, which could be display. People are going from organic search to referral. So you can see the top paths that are actually driving the most conversions for your business. And in AdWords, you can actually see, and this is a great image to show to your clients, even if you don't have a lot of data, you can go from mobile to desktop, desktop to desktop, desktop, tablet to desktop. So this is just a great way to show how complex and how many touch points there really are on that path to purchase. And right here, so we talked about how complex this path is. And when we add attribution, you can really start to connect those dots.
Absolutely. So connecting the dots, we have all these little things that are happening like we just talked about, but it's actually drawing that line through the customer journey to see actually what led to that purchase.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you know what works, like we talked about before, if you know what's actually leading to those baskets or what's actually leading to those phone calls or those conversions or that purchase, then you can invest more there. And this is just better for your ROI generally.
Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, attributing value across your users' funnel will grow your business.
Yes, absolutely. Now, before we get into the different types of attribution models, I want to talk about what an attribution model actually is. This is probably important to set this definition since this is the attribution live stream that we're doing right now. But in attribution, all it is it's a rule or set of rules that determines how credit is assigned to the different touch points along the customer journey or conversion path. So essentially, it's just how are you taking those different 2, 3, 4, 5, 17 different things that led a customer to actually convert. How are you attributing the value of that conversion across those different things? All right, so let's do a little exercise here. So let's say this is a conversion path. And this is, best tropical vacations, right? We talked about this, bed and breakfast in Puerto Rico, and then they saw the display ad, and then they actually booked. So I'm going to ask you, Logan, which interaction do you think is responsible for the final purchase?
I mean, it could be the first one. That really started the purchase.
Could it? It did. The first process, if they didn't actually search for tropical vacations, they might not have seen Puerto Rico. Then they never would have seen this bed and breakfast. Then this conversion never would have happened. So it's got to be the first click.
Yeah, but then again, maybe it's the last one because that ended.
You're right. You're right. It could be the last click because the last click was the closest to the actual conversion, and that's actually what caused them to book.
But then again, those middle conversions really help them push them to the funnel as well.
You're right. If you're not connecting the back end to the head, then things are going to fall apart. So it's got to be the middle conversions, right? Well, the answer is it's probably a little piece of all of them, I'd say. Yeah, spoiler alert. But
right now, I mean, a lot of advertisers by default are using this last click. They're only attributing value to that last click model. And it could be many reasons. It could be because they think it's costly, it's arduous, it's difficult, or, it's complex. And we're here to tell you today that we have 2 free tools to really help you, and it's really easy to update and understand.
Absolutely.
So there's 3 main challenges we face when we're talking about attribution. One, the first is really understanding cross-device activity. So how are people going from desktop to mobile to tablet, etc.? And then this number 2 problem is understanding intra-channel activity. So how are people using search? Are they going from great tech gifts to highly rated tablets to Nexus 9? How are they doing that? And then the third is understanding multi-channel activity. How are people going from Google search to display to YouTube and back again?
So, and then taking all of this stuff into consideration, cross-device, intra-channel, multi-channel, and then trying to just, figure out what the best attribution model is, this can be really daunting. And this is why I think a lot of businesses are using this last click attribution, even though we know that this isn't really fair to a lot of the different types of advertising we're using. So let's talk about some of the tools. Will you tell us about them?
Dun, dun, dun.
Yay!
So we have 2 free tools that are outstanding. And as our technology progresses, there's going to be even more. So the first 2, the first one, AdWords Search Attribution, understands you and allows you to really understand and get that picture of cross-device and intra-channel. And then the second one is Google Analytics Multi-Channel Funnels. And this will allow you to see how users are going from social to referral and back to direct search again. And so we're first going to talk about AdWords search attribution.
Awesome. So let me tell you a little bit of things about the AdWords search attribution, and later on we'll talk about analytics. But AdWords search attribution lets you assign credits to touch points that happen on the search network. So what are some cool things about it? One, it's free. It's a free tool. It's available to all advertisers using the AdWords platform. So very, very easy to use. I'm going to jump to that toward the end there, flip the switch. It only takes 5 minutes to set this up. So there's no need for tags, customization. This is a very, very simple thing to do. And it simplifies the process for selecting which model is best for you. And you can actually compare models and see which one is attributing value where. And we noticed that one of the key questions that we're trying to ask and answer is cross-device attribution. And this makes it easy to assign credit across devices. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. I know we talked a bit about this last week as well. And then personalized integration. So you can actually take that data that you're getting from the attribution model that fits best with your business, and then you can use you can use that with your bidding processes. So you can take the heavy lifting out of it there, and it's compatible with auto bidding, which is incredible because you can use smart bidding along with your attribution models, and it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, I think the main point there is that it only takes 5 minutes, even less, to actually implement this into your account.
5 minutes is that's pretty liberal. It actually takes a lot less than 5 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah, so we're going to walk you through a few steps here of how you can actually select the best attribution model for your business. And we're going to see if you're a high growth business or if you're a moderate growth business. We're going to help you choose the right attribution model for you. Step 2, we're going to show you how you can actually change that attribution model in AdWords. And step 3, we're going to show you how to rethink your timeline for analysis. So really widening that gap. So the first report we want to look at, we actually want to see first if attribution even applies to your business. So right now we're in Google Analytics, we're in the multi-channels overview report. And we want to see here a general rule of thumb is that if CIS conversions are over 20%, you should start thinking about attribution. As we can see here, we have a total of 2,232 conversions. The assist conversions equal about 70% of all of those conversions. As you can see here, referral, direct, organic search are all playing a major part as a part of your conversions overall. So this client should definitely start thinking about attribution.
Okay, and you said as a rule of thumb, what percentage should be assisted conversions?
20%.
20% or more, and that means that you should look at a different attribution model.
Yes.
Perfect. Makes sense. Love it.
Yeah. Another report, this is also available in Google AdWords and Analytics. This is the time lag report, and it shows you how long it takes from a user to actually click on your ad until they actually convert. And we can see here a good portion, at least 40%, is actually happening the first day. Then you go all the way down to the bottom, 12 plus days, it's taking at least 34%. So almost the same amount of users that it's taking to convert one day, it's taking them the same amount to convert more than 12 days. So you can imagine and just look at all the different touch points that are happening in that time length. So this client also needs to start thinking about attribution. And this is a great report to show your clients. It's absolutely wonderful. I show it to them all the time. It shows them the transitions between generic keywords to actual keywords that convert for your business. So we can see here ABC Games, ABC, and this is just a made-up company. But this is a great report. It's in Google AdWords Tools, Attribution. You go to Pass, and then you go to Top Pass. And you can actually look at your keywords, you can look at your ad groups, and you can look at your campaigns.
Very, very useful reports. So we talked about what attribution models are. Now let's talk about the different types of attribution models, and then we'll figure out which one's best for what kind of business. So there are various attribution models. Each of these, the difference is how they actually distribute that credit for the conversion across the conversion path. So we'll talk about each one of these in turn, but there's last click and first click. That's obviously assigning all of that value to 1 point. Time decay, linear, position-based, and data-driven. You can kind of see how these are set up. That gives you an idea of how it's assigning the value, but we'll get into more details. Now, what we recommend is in most of the time, and there are some exceptions, but most of the time we want to stay away from last click and first click.
Exactly.
Because if you do this, you're assigning, like I said, all of the value to just one touch point, whether it's the first click or the last click. And that isn't fair to all of the other types of advertising. We want to be fair to the poor little advertising mediums and not be the big bully and take all the credit. And that's what last click and first click do. Now, if we can, you want to select data-driven. If you can, if you're eligible, always select data-driven because it's going to take the guesswork out and it's not going to use one of these rule-based, and it's going to give you a more accurate picture. So Logan, if you could tell us about how data-driven attribution works.
Yeah, so this is an absolutely wonderful attribution model to choose. For one, because it's a dynamic attribution model as opposed to the others, which are static, meaning it's always learning, it's getting smarter all the time. And what it's doing, it's evaluating all of your conversion paths that are working for you, and it's also analyzing the non-converting paths. So it will see which ads are working, which keywords are working appropriately, and assign value to those specific keywords and ad groups and campaigns. So it's absolutely wonderful. It does require a bit of data, though. It requires over 20,000 clicks and 800 conversions in the past 30 days, and 800 conversions for that specific conversion type that you're actually going for. So it learns over time, and it's a great attribution model to go with because, again, it's dynamic as opposed to the other ones, which are static. And a very important difference here to make, again, and let me repeat myself, is that this is analyzing not only the converting paths, but the non-converting paths.
I mean, this might be a philosophical question, but I'm always a little leery of things that learn over time. I feel like it's going to like take over our business, start running things, making us, not wear jeans on Friday anymore or whatever.
The tipping point.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on. Anyway, so let's tell you about a little case study involved with moving from, this last click attribution that we tend to see businesses use to data-driven attribution. This is Purple Bricks. And what their goals were, obviously, like a lot of other businesses, is they wanted to generate qualified leads, and they wanted to do this at a lower CPA or cost per acquisition. And in addition to that, they really wanted to understand what the heck is going on with our advertising. If we're putting money into this and that and the other thing, what are we actually getting back from it and where? So what was the approach? What happened? Well, they replaced their AdWords last click attribution model that was set in AdWords, and they changed it to a data-driven attribution model. And then they wanted to maintain the usage of target CPA. So in terms of how they were actually bidding, they maintained that, as we talked about before. That's something you can totally do. And what happened? What were the results? Well, now, as I say these results, I want you guys, as sales reps, account managers out there, think about if you could show this increase in business for some of your advertisers. They saw, with just changing the attribution model, they saw a 28% increase in conversion rates on generic campaigns. Okay, so this makes sense because those generic campaigns, as we talked about before, remember those big bubbles? Big bubble, medium bubble, low bubble? Those bigger bubbles, those more generic things, they weren't getting the value that they deserve because the value of that conversion was being assigned all the way at the end. So the generic campaigns were getting more of that value, and that value was able to be shown. More impressively, 1.7, almost 2 times improvement in conversion rates on mobile generic campaigns. And mobile campaigns in general are some of the hardest to show to advertisers the benefit. And it's because they tend to be at the beginning of that search path. They tend more often to be assist. So this additional data let them really understand what was going on and make smarter decisions.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're asking, where are these conversions going? Like, how are they getting more value in a generic campaigns? Well, the answer is that you're still going to report the same amount of conversions. It's just that your brand campaigns, the amount of conversions that you see there are going to be attributed more to these generic campaigns. So it's still going to be the same amount of conversions. It's just going to move and, like Jesse said, be more fair.
Yep. And so then that way, I'm sure you guys have always heard, the search is working, but the display is not. So let's cut that. But it's because we're not attributing fairly. So if you use something like this, you'd be able to see that everything actually is providing that ROI. So very exciting.
Exactly. And if data-driven isn't available to you, that really leaves you with 3 options.
Let's talk about those 3.
Yeah. And so I want you to keep your eyes on the far right column so you can understand which business and which growth strategy is more applicable to you. So the first model, time decay, what this is going to do is allow you to attribute value to those touch points that are more closer to the end conversion. And this makes sense, right? Because someone who is more concerned about, growing conservatively or is more positioned or well positioned in the marketplace, doesn't really care that much about that first interaction. They just want to know how they can convert their users who already know about their brand. We go down into linear. This distributes credit equally across all channels that lead to the final conversion. This one's a very safe play. And my favorite, position-based. This assigns more credit to the first touch point and the last touch point. And then it assigns equal value to those middle touch points. And what I found when I was doing this for my own business is that I was really excited to get into YouTube. I was really excited to get into display. And I didn't see a lot of conversions from them right away, to be honest. But after thinking about it, after going back and switching it to a position-based model, I started seeing so many conversions just coming from display and YouTube that I started shifting more of my budget there because they're a great first interaction for customers that I didn't see with last click because no conversions were coming from that.
Yeah, especially if you need to educate your consumers about what your product or service actually is. Maybe you need to tell them, hey, have you had your mattress for 25 years? Maybe that's not a great idea. You need to actually prompt them to start doing that research. And that's where something that's actually assigning value closer to the beginning could be really important for what you are doing. So I'm gonna steal this one because this is one of my favorite reports right here. I'm gonna steal it. This is the model comparison tool in Google Analytics. I love this because even if you don't have a ton of data in here, it's a great talking point with your advertisers, because what it allows you to do, and this is down in the conversion reports and analytics, is it allows you to take a look at the different channels where the traffic is coming from, and you can compare some of these different attribution models. So you can take the last click, the last interaction attribution model, and you can compare that to any of the other ones. So in this case, we're looking at versus linear versus position-based. And what we can see is as those arrows, you can see the arrows are either green or red, either pointing up or down. I'll let you guys figure out what that means. I know it's really complicated. I'm not going to explain that because you guys are smart. But if we see in a particular model, say as we shift from last click over to maybe linear or position-based, then we see that display is actually, has a green arrow and it shows more conversions on that position-based or linear model. What this means is that we can see that last interaction or that last click model is actually undervaluing display for us. And so this just lets us have that conversation that, hey, maybe it's not that display isn't getting conversions, maybe it's that we're not using the appropriate attribution model. So highly recommend you dig in here and play with this report. Really, really cool.
Right, and this is also available in Google AdWords, but it only relates to search in Google AdWords currently. And you're not supposed to change your model overnight. You're meant to have a little think about it. Think about it with your client. Think about it with your peers. So we already talked about this. Feel free to pause the slide. We're live now, but feel free to pause this and use this for your own information.
All right. How do you actually do it? This is the million-dollar question. You talked a lot about this, but how do you actually change it?
So once you actually choose your attribution model that's right for your business, all you have to do is pick the conversion that matters most to your business. So a purchase or a lead. You don't really want to choose a conversion that says, all right, they landed on a certain page of my website, because that's not really going to drive value for you. So you want to choose a conversion that matters to you. So choose that conversion. Go into, next you want to go into and include this into your main conversions column, because what this is going to allow you to do is actually optimize this with automated bidding. From there, you simply choose your attribution model that you've already selected and how to think about with your clients and with your peers, and you're ready to go.
It's that easy?
It's that easy.
Oh my gosh. Why haven't I done this years ago?
Yeah. Step 3. So we made it. Step 3, we talked about this last week, but all you want to do here is expand the timeline and the time you want to look at the conversions, because when you change this attribution model, you're going to start seeing conversions for earlier in the conversion path. So you want to analyze days 1 through 30, typically on day 35, and we recommend a minimum look back window of 30 days. It goes up to 90.
And what's interesting here is, I think, going back to the time lag report that we were looking at before, this is really why this is important, because as we saw, 45% of the conversions were happening on the first day, but we were seeing almost that amount happening on day 12 plus. So if we have a smaller, look back window, then we could be missing this conversion information, because a lot of people are converting way further out in the process. So super, super important. Now, we talked about AdWords. Let's talk about Google Analytics and the multi-channel funnels and how we can use these to analyze the influence of touch points from all the different channels and some of the cool things about this. So first thing, again, free. It's free to all online advertisers. All you have to do is have an analytics account, and then you can gain insight into users' online experience, what they're doing, and how they're actually converting. It allows you to demonstrate the impact of all marketing channels in the consumer journey. So as we were talking about, you can look at these different attribution models and you can compare in AdWords, but in analytics, you can also see this across not just search, but across all of these different areas. So you can see, better understand what each channel, what role they're playing, getting to that final conversion. It can highlight the full value of your display efforts and your YouTube efforts, right? So some of that more upper funnel stuff. And this is very hard to do. So this is great use of this. It illuminates user touch points. So it lets you understand how many interactions they've had, when they've had them, and then it simplifies the process for selecting and comparing models. So like that report we just showed, we can take a look at some of the models and see what's actually happening there. And we can see that right in the Google Analytics interface. So really exciting stuff.
Exactly. And here's an example report again. This report I really love. We just showed it to you, but this will show you how these different touch points are assisting your business. And you can go through and check the different boxes. And it's important that you have tracking set up so you can see all this information. And again, here we have the top conversion pass. We also have the time lag, the path link. But this report, again, is super important. It's a great graphic to show your client of all these different touch points and potentially where you should be putting more budget into.
Absolutely. Now, I know that was a lot that we covered in a 30-minute time period. Be putting in your questions, but as you're doing that, I just want to kind of go back over what we've talked about. Last week, we talked about measurement, so correctly tracking all of those conversions that matter, not just the ones that are ending up in that call or that actual purchase. And then with attribution, hopefully we've convinced you to shift to a multi-touch attribution model. And again, make sure that you know which one is right for the business that you're looking at, because there are different models that can be great for different businesses. And next week, we're going to be talking about action. So using that data to drive bidding, drive your budget, and drive targeting decisions, because your new attribution data is only powerful when you act on it, right? So
exactly. And a little teaser here, we're going to be talking about how you can not only switch up the landing pages potentially for things that are earlier in the conversion, switch up your bids, switch up your ad text, so everything matches along with the consumer journey. You're going to find a lot of success with this next session.
Sounds so exciting. It can't possibly be better than this session was, but maybe. We'll see. So I'm going to open this up and see what questions we have. So be entering in those questions. Okay, so this is actually really good. Someone had mentioned prior to the start of this that they wanted to see the applicability of this to both product-based and service-based businesses. So I know we can talk a lot about e-commerce and that last touch being the actual purchase, but this is also true in service-based industries as well. So that last touch doesn't have to be a purchase. It doesn't have to be an online purchase, but it can be a call, it can be a form fill, whatever it needs to be. So this is just as valuable for service as it is for product. It's going to look really similar. It's just kind of what that last conversion actually is. One note, and I know we were talking about this, is sometimes, especially with some of the product or service, some of the shorter path to purchase, sometimes last click attribution is going to be just fine. Think about a locksmith. Can you imagine someone who's locked out of their house thinking, let me just sit on this for a couple of days. I'm going to do some research. Oh, I got distracted. I know I don't have a home or a place to bathe, but I got distracted. No, they're going to call right then when they need a locksmith. A locksmith typically is going to get all the data they need from that last click attribution model. So there are exceptions, but very powerful across both service and product.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think about a taxi driver as well. They have a very short path to purchase if they have a website. And also think about, that's why I said I want to stress that you want to change your attribution model according to your main conversions that matter to you, because some of your conversions, or if you have goals imported from Google Analytics, you can keep those as last click as well. But your main conversions, you definitely want to change if you're over that 20% assist and some of the other metrics we talked about earlier today.
Fantastic. Do you want to have a read on that one while I answer this one for everybody?
Yes.
So you can read this one. I'm going to answer this one, which is what is the best attribution model for leads versus purchases? Or is it more based on whether it's PPC or display? So this is a really good question. I think it actually kind of relates back to what we were just talking about. But the attribution model that's best for leads versus purchases is not going to be so much about whether it's a lead or a purchase. And it's not going to be about whether it's PPC or display, because attribution models are going to help you understand both PPC and display and what's working best. But what it's going to do is it's going to work the same for each of those cases. So what you're going to want to look at is what attribution makes sense for your growth strategy. Is it more conservative? Are you more aggressive? So it's not really going to depend on those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, short answer, data-driven attribution.
There you go.
So I have trouble setting up and understanding conversion goals. How do you set dollar amounts to certain things when your business offers so many different things for different costs? That's a great question. So last week we talked about measurement and how you can actually input dynamic conversion values for each of your conversion types. So if you have a thank you page or a thank you for a lead page, for a lead you can enter the same amount. I know it's going to be different, but I would recommend having potentially separate landing pages for each of these different conversions that you're talking about. If there is a lot, it's more work, but that could be a great option for you. And Google AdWords offers dynamic conversion values, so you can actually see and check ROI directly in the system.
Interesting. So this one, I'm going to start the answer to this one if there's anything you want to add. Is it possible to use the model comparison charts to look at which models work best for a particular business, i.e., why would you need to just pick one model when you can look at data from all of them? I think this is a really good question. I like to look, if you can compare, it's a good idea to look at all of them and you can show them, if you are using a rule-based attribution model, so those ones in the middle, you can say, hey, this is the value when we look at this attribution model, this is the value when we look at this one, and then you can give that clear view. But if you can use data-driven attribution, I think that's the case when you would use one attribution model.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to change it. I know it's great just to look at it, but it's great to change it as well because you can see those different conversions being attributed to your generic search campaigns where you can't, and when you're just comparing these different models, you won't be able to see the granularity of data in your account. So that's why we recommend changing it. And you can always change it back very simply, just the same way you set it up. You're going to get the same amount of conversions. It's just going to be moved over to your more generic campaigns.
Yeah, but it's a great question. This is an easy one. How do you get active data-driven attribution enabled?
So it does require 20,000 clicks over 30 days, as well as 800 conversions of that main conversion type that you're going for. And once our AdWords system recognizes that you have that data, you actually be able to see that in the AdWords interface.
Great. And then along that same line of, kind of going into and actually enable some of these things, someone's asking, can you go over how to select in setting? Again, that was a little quick. So go over how to set the attribution model just really quickly if you want to just kind of.
Yeah, so exactly. So you want to choose, just go to your conversions, pick any conversion that matters most to your business. Once you go there, click on it, edit the settings, you'll be able to see, I'm having a tough time just visualizing it right now, but you'll be able to see, the conversion name, the conversion value, whether you can include it in your conversions column. And then at the very bottom, you'll be able to see, and I recommend just rewinding this video as well to see the interface, but you can just scroll down and see that all you have to do is just really the click of a button and just change that attribution type. It's very simple. So I hope that answered that.
Awesome, great. Here's another kind of technical one. How do these tools help measure cross-device and multi-channel conversions when the user is not signed into the account? I don't think it really can. So if a user is not signed into the account and they are actually moving from, maybe one channel or one device to another, then can we actually track that? And I think the short answer is no.
Short answer, no, but we do have other options as far as user ID. If you have a large business, if you have a large amount of data, we do have other options to track that. And short answer, we have other options for that.
But I would think that'd be for larger businesses.
Yes, exactly.
So for smaller businesses, if they're not signed in, then we're probably not going to be able to track that. So that means that this isn't going to be perfect, and it might still be undervaluing some of the conversion data there. But generally, people stay signed in when they're kind of navigating the web and navigating devices. So this one is asking, what was the search attribution model you referred to in the beginning? And I think that is what that's referring to is not a specific attribution model that was referred to, but just talking about the difference between looking at the attribution models and the tools you have in AdWords versus analytics. And again, if you review this and you go back to that slide, I think you'll see what you're looking for there. But what that just means is that we can see the search attribution and the attribution directly related to search in the AdWords interface and with some of those tools. But if we want to look at some of the other, cross-device and, some of the multi-channel stuff, then that's where we're going to look at.
Exactly.
Analytics.
So attribution in AdWords, so everyone knows, to make this clear, is only available for search and shopping campaigns at the moment. But if you want to look at intra-channel or multi-channel funnels, you got to go over to analytics to see how people are going from display. And display will be coming soon into AdWords, but right now it's only available for search and shopping campaigns.
Great, awesome. So if you want to talk about...
Yeah, so how long can you open up attribution windows? So you can open them up. I'm assuming this is referring to how long can you view the data. It's from 1 to 90 days.
And how do you track conversions when your customers check out on a third-party site? I'm gonna start this one, and you can jump in. I think the answer here, unfortunately, is it depends. A lot of times, tracking those conversions, you might have to do something like you might have to just track when they actually click through, because once they leave the site, we're not gonna, we can't track it from there on the website. But it depends how it's set up. So if there is some way that we know they're going to that site and we know they're converting, we can track it. But otherwise, we might just need to track that as more of a lead. I'm not sure if you have any other thoughts there.
I think that's right.
Good. Well, thank you. I worked really hard on that answer.
Let's go to this one. How to attribute for offline channels like TV, radio, and Pandora. So this is a great question. I love talking about this. So we have attribution. We have TV attribution now as part of Google Analytics. So you can actually see the search uplift after the first 15 minutes that someone has actually seen your TV ad. So that's a great new product that we have out. We also have Analytics 360 that allows you to track things like radio and things that are more offline, even that. But we also have store visits beta, which allows you to see foot traffic coming in from your campaigns. I know PetSmart has done a great job of implementing that recently as well.
Awesome. This is, I think, kind of tacked onto what you were talking about before with look-back windows, but the ask is, what's the best practice for determining a look-back window for attribution models? So it's going to depend on the products, but is there a best practice for determining, or should it always just kind of be that standard 30 days? What's your thought on that?
Yes, at least 30 days. It goes up to 90 days. I personally always use 90 days because why not?
Yeah, I think that's... the longer, when you have that look back window longer, all it's going to do is collect more data for you. So I think there's no harm in having it a little bit longer. Does changing attribution model affect your lead count? The answer is simply no. What it's going to do, the conversions are going to remain the same. It's just going to assign the conversion value differently. So rather than having all of that value and all of those leads and that value assigned to the last click, it's going to spread them out so that all of the different advertising channels are getting the credit for that. Yeah. So great question.
This is also a great question. If my budget is only $500 a month, what would be the best attribution model? This is a great question because a lot of advertisers start off with this, with a small budget just like this. And it depends on, obviously, your business, the path to purchase. I encourage you to do that research that we talked about earlier to see if attribution is even needed for your business. But with a budget like this, I would really go with linear. I think linear is a great option, so you can actually attribute value equally across the purchase path without knowing much about your business, just on ad spend. If that's the only information I have, I think linear is a pretty good option for that.
Great. So here's our client has conversions set up in AdWords, but there's no data coming through in the multi-channel funnels report in analytics. Why is that?
So my first question would be, have you linked Google AdWords to analytics? That would be my first.
And let's assume that they have.
Yes.
I've seen this happen before, and sometimes if there's not a lot of conversion data, then that data it's just not enough to have anything really funneling through. That's why that comparison, the attribution comparison report is, like I said, sometimes it might not have a ton of robust information, but at least it kind of gets that conversation going. So I would kind of wait and see if as more data comes in, you start seeing that flowing in, but sometimes we do see that actually being the case, but check that things are correctly linked.
Yeah, I mean, and also make sure that you're actually tracking and you're actually advertising on the display network or on social or using organic search so that those data points can actually show up in this multi-channels report.
Great. So this one's interesting. So in terms of the data-driven attribution model, they're saying 800 conversions for purchase or sale of a high-end product is very difficult to attain.
Yes.
How is this possible to achieve for a high-end product?
This is a great question. I love this question. So what I would do here is, I know it's hard to get that hard conversion at the end, but potentially set up softer conversions so you can get to that 800 conversion mark. I know it's somewhat cheating the system, but maybe it's someone getting to that final page that happens right before the conversion. Count that as a conversion through analytics, and that can help you get to that 800 conversion mark.
I think that's a great answer, and I don't think it's really cheating the system, because those softer conversions are important too. Even though the harder conversions would be best for the data-driven attribution model, even if we have those softer conversions, that still is getting to that endpoint in the process. So I think that's a really great answer. And if it's not possible for high-end to use data-driven, you can use one of the rule-based attribution models, and it can be a lot better than last
Exactly.
click. All right. So any of these that you want to go for?
Is there an easy guide to setting up conversion tracking? That seems to be the most difficult process for clients. Yes. And again, if you have a lot of clients, I recommend using Google Tag Manager, because when you're first starting out with clients, it's very difficult to actually see all of their products. They could be launching something soon. They don't tell you about it. We've all been in that situation. And then it's stuck. All right, we need to implement that code, et cetera. So I would recommend first, when you first onboard a client, get them set up with Google Analytics, so then you can go through, and as you keep learning things, you can actually go through and add those remarketing lists that apply most to their business, or add those conversions that apply most to your business. So my best answer for that is to make sure you have Google Tag Manager set up right from the get-go.
Okay, let's see. This one I'm trying to wrap my head around the question here. If 60% of the conversion values and conversions are less than 1 day in the time lag report. Okay, so we're looking at the time lag report, 60% are less than 1 day, or only 1 click before the conversion, is an attribution model still relevant for the account? I'm going to say yes. So if basically the way I'm understanding this question, and feel free to chime back in if we're not answering it correctly, but the way I'm understanding this is, if 60%, so the majority of the conversions are happening within the same day, is it still relevant to have a different attribution model? I would say the answer, it depends. I think still 40% of the conversions are not happening in that day. Then yes, there could definitely be some value to see what's happening that other 40% of the time. But within that single day, there could still be some cross-device. There could still be research being done. It could just be being done more quickly. So the short answer, I think there's definitely still value.
Exactly. So time lag report's a great report to look at, but don't let that be the only report you're looking at. Look at the other reports that we mentioned today, and that should help you determine if switching up your attribution model is best for you.
All right, and then you can check these other ones out. I'm going to tackle this one. With different attribution models in AdWords or analytics, what do you mean by giving credit to the different touch points? Is that referring to adjusting bids in the future? So what I mean by giving credit is essentially, like, let's say that you have a purchase that's $100. Okay, so that purchase is worth $100, and there are, for the sake of simple math, let's say there are 4 touch points that happen before that purchase of $100. What's happening now with last click attribution is we're assigning all of that credit. We're basically saying that the last click, let's say it's generic, let's say it's a paid search, like a brand paid search, we're assigning that full $100 value of that purchase to that last click. And then the 3 before are getting no credit, meaning they've given no value, they've done nothing to attain that $100. If we assign the credit more fairly, let's say we're using linear approach, because my brain's a little fried and I want to do some simple math, is if we take that $100, we're saying, okay, touch point A, you're worth $25 to us. Touch point B, you're worth $25. C, D, $25. So we're just assigning the credit evenly. Now, does this affect how you're bidding in the future? Quite possibly. If you're looking at search, it could affect the way that you're bidding, and it could because you're shifting the value. So you're saying, now that I'm looking at this in a different way, the value is actually greater to me, and it's actually, you know, providing more value for that end conversion, so I'm willing to pay a little bit more for it. So that's what we mean about assigning credit. I hope that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, and as we're talking about these generic campaigns, these brand campaigns, it's just becoming more apparent to me that we should potentially have a live stream on just, you know, naming the right campaigns properly, so you can actually see what's going on when you're actually comparing these different attribution models, but a different topic.
Okay, so we do have some more questions, but we're getting to the top of the hour, so that's really all we have time for. But thank you so much for all of this engagement. This has been incredible, great questions. We will make sure that your questions are answered. And please remember to tune in next week for action. It's going to be really, really exciting. And have a fantastic rest of your day and weekend. And wish me luck at my brother's wedding.